Hello everyone, Vanguard of Valor here, and it's good to be back. It has been a long time since I've been here on YouTube, and there have been a variety of reasons for that, mostly starting with our house burning down last March, and with a variety of problematic things happening since then, it has just not been a great year. But I'm hoping to get back into the swing of things again here, and we've picked a fun game to come back with. Now before we get into the Breach, I also wanted to mention that you may have noticed we have a new intro that played at the start there. The awesome logo that you guys have probably seen since last May, because that's when I commissioned it, was done by the incredible Leah Fask, who I'll have linked to in the description here, so you can go check her out and let her know she did a great job if you so choose. But either way, today we're starting with a game I've been waiting to play for a long time. Specifically, Into the Breach here, which is developed by the same developers as FTL, Subset Games. Now, Into the Breach is a bit of a different game than FTL is, but it's still a very interesting one for me, very intriguing, and one that I'm very much into. So we should have a fun time playing through it here. Now, we're going to hop right in, I'll explain things as we go, and then we'll go from there. Now, we're not playing completely blind either. I did just playthrough on stream before starting this one, but I have cleared that data, so we're starting from scratch here on our new campaign, so we'll be able to unlock everything as we go. And let's do it. Humanity destroyed. Vec threat unstoppable. Mission failed. Open a breach. Time to go back and try again. And here we have our starting screen. So now when we're starting a new campaign, there's a lot of different things we have to choose between, but since this is our very first campaign, there isn't really. We start off with a pilot and 3 mechs, and in future runs we'll be able to choose which pilot we start with, and we'll be able to choose which set of mechs we start with. But as it stands right now, we don't have a whole lot of options available. We'll be starting with Ralph Carlson, our captain here, who has our ability to gain 2 additional experience every time he kills something, which isn't the most incredible passive benefit, but it's not bad for starting out. And on the right hand side, we have our team of mechs. So, in this team, we have a combat mech for punching things, a cannon mech for shooting things at a bit of a range, and an artillery mech for shooting over obstacles and pushing enemies around. We'll go into more of what these guys do specifically in a minute, but it's good to know that if we ever wanted to, we can rename and recolor them if we have colors unlocked. For now, we're going to leave them all with their default names for our first playthrough, but in the future, we may be renaming them as we go. The other things that are worth noting on this screen here is that there's achievements for completing the game after beating 2, 3, or 4 of the game's 4 islands before going to the final battle, and there are also 3 icons here for different achievements that are specific to that team of mechs. So with this team, one of our challenges is to drown 3 enemies in water in a single battle, another one is to kill an enemy 5 or more tiles away with a dash punch on our punching mech, and another one for completing our first island. These shouldn't be too challenging, although the dash punch one is often a little bit tricky. As it stands, we're going to stick it to normal difficulty for now, because this one is still fairly challenging, and we'll see how it goes. Let's start our game, and go from there. These corporate islands are the Vec's breeding ground. Wipe them out here, we save the world. So we have 4 islands to work through. Basically forest, desert, ice, and garbage, and in future runs we'll be able to go to them in any order we want. As it stands right now, though, we have to go through them from left to right, so we'll be working first with our forest island. Now, on this screen, there's a couple of different things that are very important for us to know what they mean. And the top left here, we have corporate reputation, which is basically as we play through missions on an island, we'll gain points here that we can spend at the end to buy pilots, weapons, power, things like that. Then we also have Reactor Cores, which are gained in maps and at the end by spending our reputation, which allow us to add power to our mechs so we can do more with them. We also have our Power Grid, and this is basically our death tracker. If this ever hits 0, it is game over. The Power Grid takes damage every time an enemy successfully attacks one of our buildings, and it can pretty easily get out of hand if you're not careful. There are some ways to regain power, either at the end of an island or by getting a power upgrade in a mission, to buff it up so we have a bigger buffer there. And there's also an ability called Grid Defense. By default it's at 15%, and that'll mean that there's a chance, right now 15% chance, that if an enemy attacks a building, it just doesn't take damage. We can increase that by gaining power when the power grid is already full, and some pilots have abilities that increase our grid defense, but it's usually not something we want to rely on because it just isn't super high % chance of actually happening. Our last statistic here, saved people, is basically our score counter. Every map that we play on has 1,000 possible people to save, and any damage to a building reduces the number we get at the end. So we can basically count this as our score. A score of 40,000 would be, I think a score of 20,000? A score of 20,000 I think is perfect, because then we would have 5,000 from each of the 4 islands. As it stands, though, we can also take a look at our mechs. So here's our combat mech. We can see the pilot, in this case Ralph Carlson, and we can move him off and put something else in if we want. We can see he has passive ability and 2 other locked abilities. As we level up our pilots by gaining experience, they'll gain new skills that'll make them better mech pilots or otherwise benefit our team. We can see how much power is available in this mech, and we can install power cores to buff them up. And we can see what we're spending our power on. Right now, we're powering our primary weapon, the Titan Fist, which does 2 damage to an enemy and shoves them back away from us. If we wanted to, we could upgrade it with a dash, which allows us to attack from range, or with damage, which allows us to hit for 4 instead of 2. Similarly, we can put power into our movement or into our health if we wanted, and we have a slot for an additional weapon in future. Our other weapons, mechs rather, are actually also piloted. This one has Zoe Romano on it at the moment, and she has similarly got 2 locked abilities. She doesn't have a passive though. Only the named special pilots have passives, so we'll get them as we go. Her mech is a similar setup, except the Taurus cannon that it has could shoot from any distance in a straight line as long as there's nothing in the way, dealing 1 damage and pushing the target back. And our artillery here, being piloted by Leo Volkov, has similarly 2 locked abilities and the Artemis Artillery, which does 1 damage to the target it actually hits and pushes everything in a plus shape around it away. With those 3 mechs, we will hopefully be able to save the day, but for now, let's go to our first island and see what it's all about. Archive Incorporated. This museum island recreates old Earth as it was before the oceans rose and nearly wiped out humanity. Its CEO is Dewey Alms. It is a temperate environment, which we'll go over once we get there, and we can see at the bottom of the threat scanner the type of enemies we're going to have to deal with and what their boss is going to be. So let's hop in there and find out more.
The bad news is the Vek are overrunning our islands, putting refugees and historical artifacts at risk. The good news is we have old Earth military artifacts that can help in the fight.
Alright. So here we have our first island. And the island maps are actually pretty important because each map has 7 maps that we'll be able to contest. However, we only have enough time to fight 4 of them. After we do 4, we'll need to return back and fight the final fight here at our corporate HQ. Each one has different rewards available. So for example, the Relic Preserves here has 2 star options on it, which will give us 2 corporate reputation if we complete those objectives on the map. Meanwhile, the Marshall District here has only got 1 of each. It has ending battle with less than 4 damage to our mechs, and protecting the emergency batteries being the objectives on this event. It also has an event going on called Tidal Waves, which means the water is going to be causing some problems there. So depending on where we go, we'll be able to get different rewards, but also have to deal with different types of challenges. Because we have a limited amount of time, we want to try and maximize the rewards that we get, and usually we would do that by going to as many 2-star locations as possible, because corporate reputation is really valuable. It allows us to buy more power cores to power up our mechs, and supplement them with new abilities as well. But since there's only 2 of those, we'll probably be going to these 2 locations, and either 2 of these ones as well, to make up the rest of our events. For now, though, let's hop into our first map, the Relic Preserves, and see what happens. We can see the map before we get there. We can see that there are 2 rockets on this map, and we have to protect them as our 2 bonus objectives.
Well, these satellites were recovered from orbit a long time ago, but they should still function well enough to help us detect Vek activity across the island.
Well, let's get down there and see what's what. So as we start a map here, there's a lot going on that we should probably talk about quickly here before we get started. First of all, the yellow terrain is where we can place our 3 starting mechs, and we can place them wherever we would like. Let's place them there for now. But the terrain we're looking at is also pretty important. Most of these green tiles are just general ground tiles. They don't have any special effects on them. You can move across them normally. Nothing else fancy happens. Forest tiles are basically the same as ground tiles. They don't block line of sight, they don't slow movement. What they do, though, is if you're standing in a grass tile and it takes damage, it lights on fire. And a burning grass tile will cause any enemy who spends a turn, or ally who spends a turn on that tile, to catch fire as well, also taking damage over time. So they're actually more like environmental hazards than they are protective spaces, which is a little bit of a turnaround from how these normally work. We also have water tiles here. If enemies who can't fly get pushed into a water tile, they'll die instantly, whereas flying enemies will just hover over them. However, even if we can stand in the water, like our mechs can, they can't attack in the water. So we have to be careful about ending our turns there, because we won't be able to take any actions from those positions. We also have mountains, which are impassable, immovable tiles. If we attack them twice, either through enemy attacks or our own, they'll break down into normal ground, though. And the last two tiles are the most important ones. These building tiles are our power grid. If the buildings take damage, we'll take damage on our power grid, bringing us closer to death, and it'll also reduce our civilians saved score at the end, so saving those is a pretty high priority. And we also have these satellite rockets. These are our objective tiles. We have to protect these, otherwise we won't get our bonus stars. So, we also have our enemies on the map here. We can see there's 3 different types of them so far. One of them is a Hornet, and the Hornet has an ability to attack an enemy directly next to them for 1 damage. We have our Firefly, which has an ability to fire a damage across any distance in a straight line. And we also have a Scorpion, which webs up a target, preventing it from moving, and then deals 1 damage. Once we hit start, though, we'll see how this is going to play out. At the start of each turn, the enemies move and tell us what their action is going to be. Then it's our turn. So while we know that this one is going to attack this building, this one's going to attack this rocket, and this one's going to attack this rocket, they're not actually going to do it until another turn happens. So we have some time here to try and mitigate the damage. Now, while they're telling us what they're going to do, what's worth noting is they're going to continue doing it even if we have an attack that moves them. So this person is saying they're going to attack directly forwards. If, for example, our mech here were to stand here and punch him, he would continue to do the same action, except now he's targeting our tank instead. As a result, we can use these guys often to cause them to attack each other or to miss instead of doing something that would actually be problematic. We can also see these emerging tiles are spaces where enemies will spawn from on future turns. So they're not going to do anything there right now, but they may do something there in future. Now, we're going to have to do some fancy maneuvering here to try and protect as many of these guys as possible, because we want to try and avoid allowing any building damage to happen, and we have to make sure that these satellites survive. So one thing that we could do, we could take our mech over here and punch this guy, which would kill him outright. Then all we'd have to do is maneuver so that this Scorpion doesn't attack this building, and that this Firefly doesn't attack this rocket. However, because of the way that the positioning would go, if we stand here and push him, he's just going to move over and attack this building instead. So our tank here kind of can't help us with this guy. If we move around behind him instead and attack this way, he'll take a damage, but that attack will also push him into the building, which will cause both of them to take a damage. So that's not going to be better either. As a result, if we want to protect this building, the only way to really do it is to have our mech come over and punch him sideways, because that'll make sure he's moving in the other direction. Or we could use our artillery over here to shove him over that way instead. Given the way this is set up right now, though, I think our best course of action is probably going to be having our mech come over and punch this guy, and having our artillery try and shove these guys out the way. An attack right here will do 1 damage to him and move this Firefly over, so he's going to attack the mountain instead. It does mean that our tank's not going to be able to do much this turn, though, which is kind of problematic unless I use him to finish off this bug. Either of those options are okay, but they could be better. Alternatively, we could use the artillery to shove this guy over 1, and then use the tank to shove him back 1 so that he now blocks this spawn and takes a damage, but that won't kill him either, and it'll still leave the same scenario over here. So I think the better case is to have our mech push this one over 1 and have the tank kill it, and that way we should be able to make better use of our guys in future turns. I can also block this spawn if I want with the tank and then use it to shoot him from behind, so we only have 1 spawn next turn, which might make things easier on the next turn, but may make things harder on the turn after that. There's a lot of strategy that goes into these turns, and I'm going to try and voice as much of it as I can to try and make sure that I'm giving you guys all the information I'm working through when we're planning these moves, but we'll see how it actually plays out as we go. So I think right for now, since we're going to be allowing a damage on this, I think it's probably going to be in our best interests to block a spawn for at least 1 turn, so that we can have better map control and hopefully use this tank better in future turns. So let us come to this position and punch this bug over 1, which frees up the webbing and causes him to now miss. Then we can use our tank's shot to kill him. Since we're attacking him in a forest tile, it also ignites that forest tile for future, so if anyone stops there, they'll catch on fire. And we can use our artillery strike to shove this guy out of the way and hit this bug for 1. So it means we will not be perfectly safe, but it will mean that we only take 1 damage on these core mission objective buildings, which means it's more likely that they'll get off okay. Since they have 2 health, they can afford to take 1 damage. And that mountain is now taking a hit. If it gets hit again, it'll be destroyed. Alright, now our enemies are maneuvering around again, and that's just fine. Now you'll see here that these tiles are being shown as danger tiles, and that's because they are going to ignite. When this rocket launches at the end of the turn, anything directly next to it just gets killed. So we can actually ignore this bug if we want, because he'll get killed by the fire, and he's currently attacking an empty tile, which means nothing's going to happen there. However, we have to make sure we keep track of which order these events happen in. We can see here that the rockets have their turn after the bug's attack, because that will be relevant as far as, like, will this guy be able to shoot before this rocket attack goes off? And the answer is yes, he definitely will. So we have to be a little bit careful about the order of these events, but otherwise we should be able to manage it okay. Now, we actually have a pretty fancy play here we can do, which can kill both of these guys and let this guy be killed by the rocket. So in order to make it happen, what we're going to do first is we're going to take our tank over 1 tile and shoot this guy into his adjacent mountain. Since he hits the mountain takes 1 damage, and so does he, so we go from 1 damage to 2. Then we take our punching mech, move him over 1 tile out of the rocket's death radius, and punch this guy back 1. That might not seem incredibly ideal, because now he's not going to be hit by the rocket, but we can use our artillery to do 1 damage to him, and push this guy into this mountain again, causing him to die as well. That gets us 6 experience for our artillery, and clears out all of the bugs. We see his attack misses, the rocket launch goes off, killing that bug outright, and some more bugs spawn in. This guy is a problem. What he does is he buffs all of the other enemies. He can't attack directly, but he can cause us a lot of problems. So in this case, the Soldier Scion gives any other enemies an additional health as long as they're on the battlefield together. So we really need to kill him. So as much as I would like to leave our mech here and deal with this bug, we're going to bring our punching mech over so we can sock it to him. The 2 damage means he dies outright, and now we can deal with the rest of this a little bit more easily. As it stands, we kind of need to body block for this attack, because otherwise he's going to hit the building behind it, and while I could push him to the side, it would either mean that he pushes in here and attacks this building instead, or hits our satellite rocket. The satellite rocket can take the damage, that might be the best play here, but we'll have to think about our moves a little bit first. As it stands, we do have the ability to hopefully get rid of this guy. If we use the artillery to push him over 1, then he would catch on fire, and we can attack him again with the cannon, which would do another damage, but it wouldn't clear him out outright. I think our best course of action here is basically going to be to let this guy go, except push him back or forward a tile so he blocks one of these spawns to make it a little bit easier for future turns, and use our tank to kill this guy. Because if we just use the tank here to push him into the wall, that extra damage will clear him out. Alternatively, if we move the tank over one, we can shove him back one tile, and use the artillery to shove him back another tile so he misses. As it stands, I think it's better for us to actually tank the damage on our artillery and use him to block one of these spawns and kill this guy outright than it is to just ignore one and let this guy live as well. So we're going to use our cannon mech here to shove this guy back into the wall, clearing him out. And we're going to use our artillery mech to shove this guy back and block a spawn. So he shoots us, and we're on fire, which is not great. But we'll see what happens here. So all we have to do is survive this turn, and we should be able to do that okay. Now, what we may wind up doing is moving our artillery mech into the water to hopefully put this fire out and then not have to deal with it. And then all we have to do is make sure these guys don't get to attack their intended targets, which should be pretty easy. So if I put him in the water here, he is no longer on fire, so he won't take damage at the start of the turn and won't die. Then we can use our mech over here to punch this bug and ensure his death. And we can use our cannon mech to push this guy out of the way. So now he isn't going to do any damage to anything either. If we end our turn here, the fire damage would have happened before any of them get an action, which would have killed our artillery, but since we put him in the water, it puts the fire out, so it doesn't matter. And that is our first successful mission.
We're already getting the data back from the satellites in orbit. Excellent job. We'll be able to spot the Vec before they attack.
That gets us 2 corporate reputation for defending both the satellite launches. We get 1,000 civilians protected because we didn't take any damage on the buildings, and we get experience for all our pilots based on what they've killed. And now we have access to more areas to go. So, we could either go to the Central Museums, the Old Earth Park, or the Marshall District. These areas also have some kind of environmental effects, as shown by air support and tidal waves. We may want to go to one of those just to see what they're all about, but I think first we're going to go to the Old Earth Park so we can get our way over to this one. Alternatively, we could do Marshall District and Central Museums, as long as we get our way over here first. The Marshall District might be the way to go. Why not? Let's go to the Marshall District first and deal with the tidal waves and see what this is all about.
An offshore volcano is causing tidal waves along the coast and may help wash away the Vec threatening the area.
Well, let's go. We have to try and not take damage to our mechs here, and we have to protect the emergency batteries in the back. That should be doable. We start off with a Soldier Scion, a Scorpion, and a Firefly, so we're going to have some close-range tying up, some long-ranged spit, and we are going to have to deal with this guy buffing everything. We also see these tiles will become water at the start of each turn, which may be problematic, especially since our emergency batteries are here. Hopefully that doesn't turn that tile into water too. As it stands, though, we're going to get ourselves into a best position we can to deal with whatever is going to be happening here, and hopefully things will go smoothly. I don't really know where I want to put the tank here, though. I kind of can't get them around the back, which means we probably want them to be in the front so they can hopefully do something helpful, but this may be a problematic spawn for these guys. I could put our mech over here, but then if he moves over this way, we can't clear out the Soldier Scion, so this may be a tricky starting map. We'll see what happens, though. Alright, largely as expected, this enemy didn't move too far off, and this one has come over to attack our mech, meaning this guy is the only one we actually have to move out the way. Now, there are a couple different things we could consider here. For example, this guy right now means we can't move at all. If we wanted to try to get around that, we would have to push him with some other ability of ours. Since we don't have anything that can get around to the front to actually push him properly, that's going to make things a little bit more difficult. So we may not be able to easily avoid this attack, but we'll see what happens. Now, other options available to us. For example, if we could use our artillery to push this guy into him, we could bring him down to 1 health, but that won't make it easily to actually clear him out. In order to get through here, we really do have to push an opening. Now, alternatively, we can use our artillery to shove this guy over 1 so he attacks his ally instead of attacking the building, which is a pretty good turnout for us, but it does also mean that it's going to be harder for us to get over to kill the Soldier Scion, and the longer this thing lives, the more enemies he's going to be buffing. If we kill him, then any buffs he's giving out immediately go away, so the enemies will lose that health as soon as we kill him, but it's going to make it harder for us to kill anything else. Now, we can guarantee this bug dies. If we use the artillery to shove him over 1, he'll attack him for 1 damage, and we can punch him with the mech for 2, bouncing him off the enemy in the back for 3, meaning he's down to 1 health, so that attack is going to kill him. However, I can't do that and also make sure my mech doesn't get hit. So if we do that, that's probably going to happen. Plus, our tank can't easily move anywhere at all because he's completely blocked in by the enemy coming and attacking the mech. So the tank's probably going to have to move over here in the hopes of getting around the side to do something over here next turn. It's not necessarily a great strategy, because if an enemy stops here, then we're going to be very stuck. But, given the way the map is laid out, I don't know if we have much of a better option here. We can't really do anything about the Soldier Scion this turn, and while I could move the tank over this way, it's going to be underwater, and we'll have to move it out next turn. If we don't have an easy path to get out, that might be a problem. So let's try this plan first. Shove them so they're not attacking the city, because we can afford to take a damage to our mech. That's not the end of the world. But we're also going to need to bring our tank around the side so that it can hopefully get around to help. This is not ideal, but we have to do what we have to deal with. Now, if we ever make a move we don't want to make, we can undo our moves, as long as we haven't taken an attack yet. Once we attack, it locks that move in. Similarly, we have the ability to reset a turn if we start doing an action and then realize something is going to go horribly wrong. We can only reset a turn once per battle, so be pretty careful with them, but it is an option that we have if we need them. As it is, I think we have to end the turn like this. I don't see a better course of action for us, so let's see how it plays out. As expected, this bug kills him, but since I forgot to check the attack order, I didn't realize that he actually goes first, which means that the bug that was going to attack us never gets the chance to, which is pretty cool. Now, these guys are going to be a little bit problematic, because that's a lot of attacks that we're going to have to deal with now. The water is going to come in and attack him, but since he's flying, it doesn't matter. These guys are in a similar predicament, where they're not in a great spot, but we also have 3 enemies attacking buildings that we're going to have to get rid of. So this may be a little bit problematic for us. Now, there are ways that we can get around this. So this guy is just going to attack a wall if we do nothing, and that's fine. This one is going to attack our power cells, which we absolutely can't allow. And we still have the Soldier Scion that we can't really afford to deal with, because we don't have enough actions to clear out all of these guys and protect all of our buildings. One simple slap to the side will move him out of the way, but he can attack from the water, and we really don't want to attack him to attack this building from there, because then we can't stop him. The alternative is to try and kill him with the mech, so we can at least hit him for 2, and then maybe we can kill him with an artillery, although if he does stand here, there's literally no way we can get a line of sight on him. So if he decides to do that, we just cannot stop him, which is not great. We can use the mech to come over this way and try and deal with one of these attacks, which is maybe not a bad idea. Only problem is we'd have to do that right now, which would mean that in order to move this guy out of the way, we're going to have to deal with some other problems. As it stands, using the tank to push this guy out of the way is probably best. Then we can use our artillery to deal with one of these, and use the mech to deal with the other one. But the fact that we can't kill the Soldier Scion still is making this a worrying proposition. Now, the attack order here is not super relevant because we're not planning to shove anyone in the way of anyone else as it stands. We could try to manipulate this guy in front here so that his friend kills him, but we don't really have an easy way to do 3 damage to him. We could more easily do 2 damage to him, but not 3, so he'd still get his attack at the end of the turn, which is not what we need. We could also shove this guy over 1 so that he falls in the water and attacks his ally, but that wouldn't let us deal with this problem very well. So we're kind of working through a bunch of different issues here, which is going to make things a little bit tricky. The way I'm thinking it, what we're probably going to want to do is use our tank over here to shove this guy out of the way. Come the mech over here to punch this guy onto the spawn, because that'll block the new spawn and kill him. And we use the artillery to shove him over 1. Now, the only problem with that is our mech's going to take 2 damage in order to do that, because in order to shove this guy this way, we have to attack this tile, which would mean that the mech has to come here and attack him first, and then also needs to be set on fire as a result, which is not really what we want. Since our mech only has 3 movement, we can't get all the way over to this tile if we move him out of the way first. This is a really tricky one. I don't see a better play here. We could use the artillery to attack here instead, which would shove him into that guy, dealing 1 damage to each of them, which is not significant, pushing him into this building, which doesn't help. We can hit here with the artillery first, and then not move anything in the way, which means this building's going to get hit, even though this one won't. And that's not terrible, but it's also not good. We're taking building damage for no reason then, and we still need to get this guy out the way. We could try to kill the soldier scion and then move him, which doesn't make any difference. Basically, we can't worry about the soldier scion in this map at this point, because we can't kill it fast enough for it to be relevant, which really sucks. Man, this is a tricky one. I think now the other course of action we could do is move the artillery here, attack this guy with the artillery, which would shove this guy over so he attacks the scion, and make him attack this. No, because it would just push this guy over once he attacks the scion, would leave a space so the mech can come in and kill him, because it would do the final piece of damage. Then this guy would still attack the building, and we can use the tank to clear him out. But then we're still taking a damage on one of these buildings. We get that damage back because our power generation puts us back up to 5 at the end of the battle. But this does make it a tricky position to be in. Plus it would mean he dies when the water hits him, so that would get rid of another bug. That might be our best option here. We still take 1 damage on one of these buildings, but I don't think there's really a better way to do that, because otherwise we're taking 2 damage and setting our mech on fire, which is really pushing it for it not dying at the end of the next turn, because we're probably going to need him to make sure something else stays alive, and I don't see a better out here. If you guys do see one, then let me know what you think I should have done, but I think this is probably going to be our best course of action here. So we're going to take this mech to this position and fire here to shove him back into the water, so he dies at the start of the next turn. Then we bring our other mech over here to punch him to death, so he's done. We bring our tank over to here and punch him, so he's no longer hitting the power cells, and I think that's as best we can do. Hopefully our grid defense pulls through here, and this one doesn't take damage. Water comes in, kills him. Ooh, it worked! Our grid defense actually happened, and we didn't take damage. That was pretty lucky, but that's the whole point of the grid defense mechanic. It allows these kinds of plays to actually happen. This guy's come back here, which is fine. These ones are giving us trouble, which is not great, but not the end of the world either. So one thing we can do here... This is a little bit of a pickle, because we kind of need to hit this guy out of the way, otherwise we'd lose this building, which would be not good. Since the Scion is here, he's preventing us from knocking this guy out of the way, which is going to make things a little more difficult for us. We basically have to use the tank to hit this, because otherwise we lose our objective. We basically have to use the artillery to maneuver this guy, and we can't kill this one fast enough because of the bonus health from the Scion that we still haven't killed. Okay. Is there any way we can do this that doesn't just leave this thing hitting us for free? I don't think so. Because we have to hit him, otherwise we lose this objective. We have to hit him, because he's hitting a building for nothing. The only alternative I see would be to use the artillery to hit this guy out of the way, so drop a shell directly on him, move him over 1. As a result, we can bring our mech around and punch him out of the way, and with the additional fire damage he'd have from being set on fire, that would kill him at the end of the turn. But that would still mean that this guy gets to attack us for free because I can't get to him. So one of these guys attacks these buildings, and I don't think we can stop it. Because the Scion is body blocking for us here. Otherwise it'd be easy. We just hit him, and knock him over one. No, that's not true. We can actually solve this. There's a better solution here that I just didn't see. The only trick is we have to do things in a very particular order. So the first thing we do is we fire a cannon here to move him out the way. We move our artillery back to here and fire a cannon shell in between, but first we move the mech out of the way so that we can move them like so, and then the mech can punch him into the free space. Now none of our buildings get hit, and we have a successful end to our turn. We also get a free kill on him since there's water moving in. And nothing takes damage. Whew! And that is kind of the joy of this game for me. It's solving those puzzles where it looks like there's no good answer, but by spending some time on it and really working your way through, you can get one anyway. And there we go. That's our 2 battles here so far in Into the Breach. Now, I'm not sure exactly how I want to run these videos, but we're probably going to be doing something like 2 or 3 missions per one. Since this one had all of the introduction stuff at the start, it makes sense to stop at 2, because I think we're at a good length already. Any longer, and people are going to stop watching by this point anyway. But if you've enjoyed our episode here of Into the Breach, thank you very much for watching. I look forward to seeing you next time. And until then, bye-bye.